How's it going, guys? Chris here. We are back with the Season 3, Week 4 Power Rankings. If you don't know what the Power Rankings are, it is me sitting here making up an imaginary, fantastical list of how I think the teams of the GBA are doing as far as likelihood to win the whole thing. It's based off a lot of things that are not just simple reading the stat sheet, reading the records. If you'd like someone to just give you a breakdown of what's going on in the conferences and where people stand that way, every Saturday we should have a weekly recap video, and at the end of it, it has a conference breakdown where they just tell you where the teams are ranked. This is for fun, speculation, opinion-based stuff, so please join me in this magical, opinionated journey we're about to go on. Alright, at number 16, we are looking at the bottom half of the people, and it's going to be faster than it normally is, or probably as fast as it normally is. So there's not a lot to talk about at the bottom. Nexus lost again. Nexus is at the bottom. He won't always be at the bottom, maybe, if he wins some more. As of now, he is at the bottom. Number 15, taking over his 2 losses, and adding another 2 losses is Sork and the Timberwolves. The reason they're at 15 as opposed to 16 is because Nexus has had a couple seasons to learn this. Should be doing better. Sork is still obviously new at it, so the fact that he's losing isn't quite as bad. But, you know, could still be winning, could see some things turned around. He had a decent strategy going in against Cooper, just, you know, something Cooper obviously had a plan for, and Sork couldn't execute it to victory, which is what you have to do, is execute to victory. 14 goes to the Denver Bronzongs. They've lost to a lot of really tough guys, a lot of top competitors in each division, so that's why they're a little bit higher than other people. Also, there's just only so much room at the bottom, and it's like, I guess in fairness, I could just randomly shuffle around all of the losers, but, you know, why bother? Despite the influx of rapid sponsorship deals to the Milwaukee Bucks, it's still probably not a good season to be a Bucks fan, as at 1-3, they just can't seem to quite get the whole thing together. Lost to another expansion team, first expansion team, interdivisional match, which is a huge loss, adds extra to it. So far, the only team they've beat was the brand spanking new to the entire format and to his team, Timberwolves. So that's not saying much. Not sure exactly what element is quite going wrong. I think maybe it's that Steve likes to have a little bit too much fun with his sets, which is cool. It's great to see, and it's fun to watch and see, you know, when the niche things do work. But at the end of the day, I think they just may not quite have the success rate that he needs them to have. Tied at 1-3 with the Milwaukee Bucks. I'm actually going to put the Yankees at number 12. They have beat Steve, so, you know, if you just want to go off of rock, paper, scissors kind of ideology there, they beat the Bucks, so they should be a little bit higher than them. I also put them a little bit higher than them because I think the caliber of people they're losing to is a little bit higher. Shady is in what is probably the second toughest division and the, you know, toughest conference by far. The Kanto Conference, you just have to be an exceptional team with an overwhelmingly positive differential to even show up, you know, on anybody's radar. And at this point, he's not that, obviously. He's, you know, in tied for penultimate lowest differential at the moment, but he does have 1 win under his belt, which is kind of what's keeping him in there. And Shady is coming to play, you know, it's just the caliber of team building and counter teaming this season has really stepped it up, and it's gotten a little bit more competitive than it has been in the past. And I think Shady's struggling to keep up with that, but he's trying, he's putting in the effort, and he's not out. I do expect to see more wins out of him this season, and I think it's going to be good to watch. You know, he's a guy that always gets very close or sneaks into the playoffs at the last minute. I wouldn't be 100% surprised to see him do that again this season, even though at this point it's looking a bit far out. In regards to the match specifically against Miguel, it was a rough loss, but, you know, it was fairly close. I think he learned a lot about what Miguel's team is going on. I think he's shaken up a lot initially by the by the matchup on paper, and I think that's been a thing that's kind of bugged him. However, this week in free agency, I actually did pick up Superior, which adds a ton of speed and just general threat to his team, and it's something I think you're going to see a lot of people not have a very good plan for, not have a very good answer for. So, we could see that turn around his fortunes in the future, or just better gameplay. I think at the very least you'll see him do a lot better against Miguel in the future. Maybe not overlook some of the obvious things that he should have brought. Not going to say what I think they may or may not have been, because everybody watches these and I don't want to give anybody, too much info. Number 11 is A-Drive in the St. Louis Rampardos. I had to spell that out because I was about to stumble on it. I was going to mess that up and say the name really wrong. I was going to say like Sam Loonies or something just ridiculous, so I had to elongate and exaggerate the words because sometimes I mess these things up because, I mess them up. I am a human. I have flaws. So anyways, Dan scoots up a little bit more, beating out Steve. Finally, moving forward than him. Good, solid 500 record for him at this point. Not quite where he wants to be in differential, but actually good enough to be tied with the San Jose Sharpedos, and tied, at -1 differential, and tied win-loss with everyone else in the gold division except for Steve, who is 1-3. The Pelipers are 2-2, the Sharpedos are 2-2, and now the Rampardos are 2-2. So Dan actually is very much primed to still do well and go far in his division, just because gold division is so middling at this point. So don't count the man out. He's a little bit lower because, again, I think the team structure he has is a little bit limited, a little bit one-trick pony. He has to work around. He has a handhold mega. By that I mean Charizard Y can destroy a lot of teams, but you really have to hold its hand and work around it just because of rocks. So you essentially have to dedicate things to making sure rocks aren't up, or that it has clean entries and things like that. And a handhold mega can hold you back a little bit and slow you down. Again, pair that with the fact that a lot of the team he has drafted now is synergetically designed to work with Sun, and it kind of limits his options. That being said, he does have a couple of more options. This week, we did get the free agency pick, dropping Clawitzer, never even saw the field, picking up Deancey, which, for his team could be a very useful fairy type. He is bringing a fairy type into a Sun team where boosted fire attacks are going to hurt, but it does have the rock typing to help out a little bit. And, off pure defensive stats, it's up there. It's massive and threatening and looming. And the only thing really holding it back is that kind of low HP stat. But there's options and there's things he can work with. At the very least, I think it's going to give him some good defensive pivots and, a couple of extra tricks up his sleeve, which in his division could be all he needs to go pretty far. This looks like a slip on paper, and I mean, it technically is as far as sliding scale numbers go. So this looks like the Duckets have slipped despite getting a win. Mostly that's just because of the way things had to shuffle out because other people's wins were better. At this point, it's almost going to become a precedent that if you beat Nexus, you drop, because, it's not adding up or meaning too awful much in the scheme of things. That being said, the Ducklets beat Nexus and the Cleveland Cavaliers, and they only did it narrowly. This is a consistent problem with Adam. It's the thing I've talked to him about. It's the thing I've talked in the other videos about. And Adam just isn't a guy that wins big. He plays incredibly safely, incredibly cautiously, but not in the way that preserves differential, in the way that preserves victory. He's playing to win. He's hoping to get in on wins, which at this rate might be good enough. Thankfully, like I've talked about before, the gold division is very middling. They're not going to have a lot of wins. That division's probably going to come down to some weird differential decider, whereas the silver division, which the Ducklets are in, he and Cooper are both at 3-1 this week, but Cooper is at staggeringly high differential compared to him. He's sitting up there at, I believe, plus 13 at this point. And Adam is at 2, which half of that was this week's victory. When you're only winning by 1 and you're playing arguably the worst team in the league, your chances of wowing people with victory is not very high. I still expect Adam to get a lot of wins, and I think his chances to make it, in on the wild card spot for the Johto Conference are pretty good. Because like I said, if he can just get in there off wins, it doesn't matter if Cooper actually beats him in wins and differential, because he's still very likely to be ahead of everyone in the Gold Division, potentially everyone combined at the rate they're playing. So Adam does slip because of an inability to sweep, basically, but it's not a slight against him. It's just his particular play style, and we'll have to see how that works out for him in the long run of the season. Number 9 is actually going to be a massive drop, and this is going to be a fairly opinionated massive drop. So get your internet posts ready to disagree with me and my opinions, and then post your own opinions, and then we'll talk about opinions and who is right. So the Red Sox at number 9. I kept Nick up very high for quite a while because he was the champion. He came off one big, the first 2 weeks. Not big, but he won against, a fairly threatening opponent, and then he won again. By that logic, he should stay at the top. It was unproven. Then he had 2 losses. He lost to Danza, which at this point is in no way a slight because Danza's kind of tearing it up, all things considered. And then he lost again this week to Fizz. The main reason I moved him down this week is not necessarily because of the 2 consecutive losses or because he hasn't had a huge standout win. It's mostly the fashion in which he lost this week. If you haven't seen the video, because only Fizz's side of the video is up, Nick brought I believe he brought Focus Band Diggersby instead of Focus Sash Diggersby, and lost Diggersby on turn 1 because of that. At that point, Nick gave up. Nick he didn't officially run away from the battle, but mentally he checked out. He even messaged Fizz and was like, hey, just go for the Gara sweep. You can do it and win. I am not going to rank people highly when they do that. A significant portion of winning in this league is mentally being prepared and playing the game all the way out. There have been a lot of wins in this league history where it seemed incredibly apparent what the outcome of the match was, and then the last 5 turns changed something, some hacks happened, etc., and everything flipped over and someone else won. That being said, Nick had another chance later on in the match, and then he missed a pretty crucial move with Hawlucha, and, further went on to lose, and he lost big to Fizz, who is a supreme threat and the de facto threat in his conference. But again, the main thing is that Nick just gave up and lost the will to win before he had even lost the match. And that's just not going to cut it. Especially, again, it's kind of funny that this happened the week against Fizz, the guy who, this is so far the only match of the season where he has had entirely correct sets and items. Every other match of the entire season, he has brought either an incorrect set with a missing move that he had planned, a lack of items on Pokemon, or the wrong items on Pokemon. And every single week, he still played it out, played to win, and won. A lot of that goes to mental attitude. Some of that also goes to the fact that maybe Nick planned too specifically and needed too much of that one element of Diggersby doing damage and potentially 2-hit KOing Dragonite to help him win. But, that's just another fault. Like, if your plan consists of down to the wire specific moves happening exactly how you plan them, you're not going to win. It's an RNG game. Sometimes you'll win, sometimes you won't. You can't build your strategy that way, in my opinion. And so if that's what Nick did, that's yet another reason to lower him. If it isn't what he did, then just by the books, the fact that he gave up and threw in the towel is enough reason for me to have no problem with this massive drop down to number 9. Number 8 is the Los Angeles Nido Kings, and last week I had them a little bit back at number 10. I explained why I felt that 10 was a fairly appropriate spot for them and how tough their road to victory is going to be. People bitched and complained and, said in the comments that Danza should be higher. I explained in the comments further that I disagree. I think Danza is number 10. I think he's a good team. I think he's got a rough road ahead of him. People complained and said Danza should be higher. So this week, Danza won. He beat Roger, which isn't all that impressive, but it furthers his record, gives him a much better winning record, puts him up second place in the blue division, and, gets him one step closer to the wild card spot or potentially the overall spot. Next week, he has a matchup against Gubs, which is pretty favorable historically because Danza's never lost to Gubs ever. He's one of the only people, I believe, that can say that. So that being said, people are going to say, Chris, why didn't you put Danza higher than 8? He deserves to be higher than 8. And you know what I'm going to say to that? Nothing. Deal with it. He's number 8. Number 7 goes to the Real Morel at this point. Pretty solid win against divisional rival Shady Penguin and, heroic icon who Miguel looks up to and idolizes, which is fair. Shady's a respectable dude that puts in a lot of work into his videos. And, he's a pretty good battler on top of that. Again, a lot of people, play that down. Shady's pretty good at the game. And Miguel is arguably great at the game. He may not be the most amazing battler ever, but he's pretty good at it. He's, cut above average at the very least. And, one thing is he is taken to this fairly well. If he makes the right calls, they are 100% the right call. That's one thing he's got going for him in the GBA format. He can get a little bit rigid and a little bit convinced of what's going to happen, and I think that's the kind of thing we saw happen with Gubs. But, when he ends up being right, he is 100% right, and things just work out for him. He makes the right plays. He managed to pretty much call everything that Shady was going to do. He got fairly fortunate that a couple of things that could have punched holes in his team weren't brought, and then he managed to bring the things to stop the ones that couldn't. Wheezing just dead stopped Mega Altaria in its tracks. Shady had been, putting in Mega Altaria pretty heavily at that point, getting a little bit predictable, and, things didn't work out for him. Trevenant had been a persistent threat, and was fairly easy to call being brought to this week's match. So Miguel managed to run pretty much a perfect counter Trevenant set with Honchkrow and, the surprise Psycho Shift, which was really great to see him bring. It's nice to see Miguel willing to innovate and use those niche moves. He's always been a guy willing to tailor the EV spreads to what he needs to do to creep specific stats and live certain things. It's nice to see him dig really deep into a move pool and bring out something cool like Psycho Shift that not only works, but just is fun and functionally awesome. Like, it did exactly what it needed to do, which was not just for a gimmick of a ha got you, but led him partially to victory. It let him use Honchkrow for a couple of other things later on in the match. So that being said, Miguel is actually runner-up for the Red Division at this point. So number 7 might be a little bit low for where he needs to be at. Potentially could be higher, but as of right now, he hasn't had the toughest opponents, and really the tough ones, the toughest that he's had to play so far, he's kind of struggled with and lost to Gubs. So when we start seeing him knock out some big dogs, like next week against Fizzy Stardust, if he can pull that off, then you're going to see me, again, probably start sliding Miguel up a little bit higher. But as he stands right now, number 7 is still a GBA main high for the Real Morel, and I think deservedly so. Number 6 is the Toronto Maple Leafeons, the ever-sliding Maple Leafeons. They're almost back to that number 7 spot that they were stuck at for quite a long time last season, but not quite there, as I still think Kote has a very good chance. But, it's looking less good now. Kind of needed that win to prove that he was the team that could best Gubs and be a top-tier threat and really stick it to people when he needed to. And at this point, he didn't get it. He lost. It was not a bad match at all, but, that's kind of what it comes down to for Cote is. Cote has shown that he can beat people he can beat. He can absolutely stomp on people he has the good matchup against. He can stomp on people that he plays better against. But people with a fairly even to unfavorable matchup and people who make consistently good threatening plays, he hasn't beaten yet at this point. Doesn't mean he can't, doesn't mean he won't, but at this point he hasn't. So Cote's kind of got to sit at number 6 until he takes out some divisional rivals and manages to bump himself back up. He's sitting at 3rd in his division right now, and that's not where you want to be. You want to either be 1st or at least 2nd overall in conference, and he is not near that. John's number 5 again. John lost. I moved John down last week despite a win, so I guess I'll just be nice and kind of keep him here because technically John is still a threat because he is in the middling division. But realistically, as much as I like John and as much as I still think he has a strong team, I think his team is weaker than last season, and overall, he hasn't impressed me. He hasn't won against anyone big or anyone threatening. In fact, he has lost both of the matches, which should have been against his big threatening opponents like Nick and Tom. If you aren't beating people who are top tier threats and you're beating Nexus and Adam, well, the only thing you have going for you is the fact that you're in an easy division at this point. I'm giving Tom a strong bump up here, and you better not let me down, Tom. Don't blow this. I'm putting you at number 4 because I think you're the guy that can win out of this middling nonsense of the gold division. I think you are the man that can do it. I think the Sharpedos have a scary as crap roster. I think Tom has gotten progressively better at the game, and I think a win against John is exactly what he needed to bump himself up, despite the fact that he's still not leading the conference. As far as morale goes and intent to win, I think Tom has it at this point. I also like to point out that I think Tom's getting a little bit deeper in his options with things that he wouldn't have thought of or used in the past, like Final Gambit Star Raptor, which was amazing. When I saw Tom actually willing to use that and effectively use it to neutralize something, I was more impressed with him than I've probably been the entire season. If he keeps looking for options like that are unorthodox but still viable and let him pull off some great things, Tom can win that. Tom can absolutely win out the gold division. He can make it to the playoffs. And with his team, he could even go the entire way. I think he brought the right team for the occasion this week, and I think he made the plays he needed to make to win. Tom's going to need to pull off some big wins against some threatening opponents just to bump up his differential higher. But at this point, he's still in the pack race, tied for 2nd place with St. Louis Rampardos at 2-2 and -1. So again, he needs to bump up the differential numbers, and make sure he, cuts the losses to a minimum, not just in obviously loss amount, but also in differential. He has a lot of bulk on his team. His team's a great bulky offense team. He needs to make sure he starts using that bulk and looking into more recovery options, keeping things alive and prolonging the game. War of attrition style. He's got things that deliver such punishing hits. If he can pair that up with the ability to actually keep things alive, Tom can win it. So yeah, that's why I put Tom at number 4. Don't let me down, Tom. Number 3 goes to the Utah Jasmine. Who would have thought the Utah Jasmine would be number 3? Going into this season, Cooper had a much better team. Everybody knew his team was going to be better, and they knew Cooper was going to pull off some wins and kind of be a threat. Who thought Cooper Koshiro was going to be tied for first place as far as overall differential goes? He is 1 win behind the 2 undefeated teams, but he's still sitting at plus 13. Think about that. The man's actually lost a match and is still at the highest differential of the other 2 teams that haven't lost a match. That means when he's winning, he is winning bigger than them mathematically. Um, and he's doing it in Cooper fashion. He's not doing it with, tremendously offensive sweeps besides Agron, I guess, Maybe Agron kind of destroyed things offensively, but it wasn't a true sweep. It was, a mix of things. But yeah, Cooper's doing it with his bulky, incredibly solid defensive core, and the ability to keep things alive. It's not just him managing to kill everything else before it kills him. It's him playing incredibly smart, methodical games where he keeps everything alive. Sork brought Infernape, which Infernape should, in theory, tear a hole through overwhelmingly most of Cooper's team. It's, Cooper only has he has 2 fighting resists, and one of them in the form of Whimsicott does not want to hang out with Infernape. And he still managed to shut it down and then just shut down the entirety of the rest of Sork's team. Cooper's a threat, guys. Cooper's at this rate the playoff ticket for the Silver Division, and if people don't start figuring out how to shut down his recovery and HP management expertise, he's just going to keep rolling through with solid 4-5-0 wins because no one can kill anything of his. So start figuring that out, guys. Number 2, number 1 pretty much stay the same. Fizzy Stardust, the winner that keeps on winning. Had an easy win after Nick gave up, but kind of had a game plan, had a good solid game plan, and he still played the match through as though it wasn't his to win, like he needed to win it, and he played it right and he played it well. Nick could have come back from that. He didn't. And at this point, Fizz is sitting undefeated and tied with Gubbs at the incredibly intimidating 4-0 and plus 13. One of these guys is going to have to crack eventually. At this point, it's just a race to see who cracks and gets their loss first. Gubbs is not a player who's going to go undefeated all season. Fizz obviously wasn't last season. The massive changes to his roster could make it so that he's the guy that does it this season. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But at the moment, still a little bit behind Gubbs just because he is not historically proven, whereas Gubbs is always a threat and remains to be as far as this moment goes. Gubbs stays number 1. He is undefeated at this point. He has tied for the highest differential. And, it's Gubbs. He's proven to be a good competitor, a strong competitor, and a guy that will win. Not going to spend a ton of time going into all of that because it's fairly obvious. You have more to talk about when people have varying records that go up and down. At this point, Gubbs is just a winner. Keep on winning. Chicken dinner. Beating Kote is pretty impressive, actually, all things considered, because Kote was perceived as the massive threat of the season. So the fact that he managed to beat him out is cool and is probably enough to keep him at number 1. The real test is going to be what happens next week. Never beaten Danza, and if history holds true, he's not going to. So if he manages to do that, you're going to see Gubbs stay at number 1. Even if he loses, he still might not drop at the end of the day just because, he's historically always lost to Danza, but still done well. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. Anyways, guys, that's going to wrap it up for this week's Power Rankings. If you enjoyed them, leave a like, comment below. Let me know what you think, how much you disagree, and how much higher you think Danza should be. Because I don't care. I'm going to put him wherever I want to put him this week and next week and any other week. I'm just kidding. There is kind of reasons for these things. Sometimes I just put people where I want to, but I try and balance it out with some fairly decent reasons. So let me know your reasons for why people should be where they are and why they aren't where they are, and etc., etc. That being said, if this isn't your cup of tea, you don't have to post the same comment every week saying, just want to hear where everybody stands. That's why we have this thing on Saturday called the Weekly Recap. You can absolutely go watch the Weekly Recap where they will give you hardline stats and facts of what happened during the matches this week, where things mathematically stand, and those guys do a pretty kick-ass job of it every Saturday. So feel free to go check that out. That said, we will see you next week. Thanks.